Hey, what's up, guys? Today we'll be unveiling a new segment to the Injustice podcast. We're going with the running title of The Curse of the Threequel. It's basically, we've noticed a running trend in basically not just pop culture, but in films in general. There is a running theme that the third film always falls flat. In most trilogies, I mean, let's just to name a few, just so you guys can understand, like the Dark Knight trilogy,
X-Men: The Last Stand.
I mean, as I'm saying, the X-Men original trilogy, X-Men 1 and 2 were great. Last Stand, not so much. The Dark Knight trilogy, Batman Begins and Dark Knight were great. Dark Knight trilogy, some people didn't like it as much. I really liked it, but some people didn't.
Dark Knight Rises wasn't that bad, though.
It wasn't that bad, but people compare it, and it is the weakest of the three.
Right. It is, but I mean,
And then, who else you got? You have the X-Men prequel trilogy. X-Men First Class and Days of Future Past are great. And a lot of people had criticisms of X-Men Apocalypse. I mean, rightfully so. They kind of neutered it there. So,
but they didn't do it as bad as The Last Stand, though.
I definitely agree. I think the First Class trilogy is better than... Well... oh my god, well, as I'm saying, if you had to...
Landmine!
I was about to say, hold on, I was about to blow myself up there. If you had compared... I mean, for early 2000s, X-Men 1 and 2 were great, and so was...
Anyways, to be brief, this series is going to be about the Curse of the Threequel, basically. Like, franchises that are... the first two movies are extremely good.
Well, it don't even have to be extremely good, but just like... They're
great, and then the third I'd say or decreases the
I'd say they
value
were
of the
basically
series.
I mean, yeah, but I'd say we're more aiming for the fact that the films just maybe like kind of like the best way I can put it is like some of the classics. Like I love the Godfather trilogy, but we can all agree the third one wasn't as good. It wasn't as good as the second one. Like, to me, if the third film is as good as the second one, then it doesn't qualify. But if it basically dips from the second film, if it's not as good as the second entry, then it does. Then you're not qualified for this list. But
let's introduce our
first going. So for our first pick for this segment, we've chosen to go with
Sam
Raimi's original Spider-Man trilogy.
Spider-Man trilogy. Everyone knows the story. The first two were good. Then we get emo Peter Parker for the third one.
There was a lot of problems with the third film. When I went back and I actually watched, which I'll give a shout out to Cinema Wins, because I went back and saw his video for everything that's great about Spider-Man 3, and there was actually some really good elements in Spider-Man 3.
Yeah.
Like, the way they handled his bringing out, basically the symbiote brings out how it brought out his frustration and his anger with like Uncle Ben, and how he was basically felt like, I mean, it was his fault in a way.
Right.
Like, it brought those elements out, but the way that finally executed in the final product in terms of everything they tried to cram in there, it was nowhere near the quality of Spider-Man 2.
This is where the cramming 5 million and two bad guys into them.
Literally, two would have been fine. Sandman and I think and Harry and New Goblin. I think
because it would have been cool if they would have teased Venom.
Yeah, like have him be like, because remember they were talking about doing a Spider-Man 4 with Sam Raimi was actually going to come back, and Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst, and they were all going to return, and you could have still, like, spoiler alert for Spider-Man 3, but Harry dies at the very end of the movie, and he's killed by Goblin. I'm not Goblin, by Venom. Sorry.
The same way he was killed.
But he's killed with his glider. That's what in my head I was thinking.
Same way.
So you could have had, which I understand, it wouldn't have made as much sense if then you couldn't have really killed Harry, because then if Sandman had killed Harry, then it's gonna be, you completely erase the whole plot thread of Peter forgiving Sandman at the end for killing his uncle, because he basically told him, he's like, it was an accident, and he was like, and he was scared, and he didn't mean to kill his uncle. and his uncle was just trying to talk him out of it. And there was, like I said, that actually hit me. Like when I saw that in the theater, I actually like kind of got not teared up, but I got a little choked up because for me,
but we were like 15 or 14 or 15 at this point. When the movie
and so for me watching this, I was like, well, actually, would have been. Yeah, 15. Yeah, we've all been 15.
Because I remember I was in.
It came out in 2007, so we've been 15.
Yeah.
So for me, like I kind of connected with it because I had lost a few years previous. I had lost my grandfather, and he kind of had that, had that kind of Uncle Ben vibe where he was really old school, very much about responsibility and stuff like that. So when I saw it, I kind of had a resignation, and like plus all three of us had followed this franchise from like when we were 10, right?
Yeah, well, that and I mean, for me,
10 because the first one came out in 2002.
For me, my love for Spider-Man went back to the Spider-Man TV series, the
animated series, yeah.
And I mean, Spider-Man, like I know Cap's my dude, but I mean,
Spider-Man was my first Marvel character I fell in love with.
Same thing. Like,
him
and Doctor Strange.
That's not even.
That's like your love affair between Strange and Tony Stark. So
right, it's really hard, but let's get back into the nitty gritty. So basically, you look at how well constructed the first two Spider-Man films are. You had one single villain. You had Green Goblin in the first film, and you had Doc Ock in the second film.
Both very well.
If you look at it, they were all like father figures because Norman was like a kind of adoptive father in terms of like he was trying to do things for Peter, and he was a nice guy, and he was trying to be invested in his future before he kind of went off the wall. And then of course Doc Ock was looking after him and taking him under his wing before he lost his wife and suffered this tragedy. And the thing is that I thought that what Sam Raimi did really well with all of his, with all the villains in this franchise, which I think that Mark Webb didn't do right in his two films, is he made you care. Yeah, he humanized, and you cared. Like when Norman was like before he kind of went off the rails, they were like Oscorp and everybody was screwing him over, and
they
basically pushed him to that point.
They were on the verge of bankruptcy, weren't they?
They were pushing him to put out those, I think it was to put out that serum and do everything, and it wasn't ready. And so Norman, trying to get a grasp on everything, was the one he used himself.
He used himself as a test dummy.
And I don't condone what he did like afterwards, but they did a really good job at making you care about how to the point of when he became Goblin.
And the same thing with Doc Ock, because as soon as Doc Ock wakes up in the hospital, and you have that really horror film style scene in the hospital with him with the arms kind of killing everybody off. He gets outside, and then he realizes the chip thing's broken, and it kind of, to me, Doc Ock, this version of Doc Ock at least, made me feel like it was kind of like a Frankenstein's monster kind of feel to this version of Doc Ock.
This version of Doc Ock to me seems like a second voice, like almost loony, but not as loony.
Like kind of like
the first start off.
Gollum and kind of like the whole Gollum and Smeagol thing.
I felt that was more. I would give that more towards Norman because he kept talking to the mask and talking into the mirror. I felt he had more of that Smeagol and Gollum kind of attitude, but I felt like with Norman, he was having that whole inner conflict. I mean, he was kind of having an inner conflict of like you can almost the internal battle of like which consciousness should take over, the good or the bad, the good of Otto Octavius. Or the negative of the sentient, robot arms,
which was Doc Ock.
And so.
But to get back on subject.
Yeah, so the first problem with the third film is that I think the first thing we kind of discussed is that the too many plot threads. They were trying to, and it's not just it bled into and it kind of carried over into what they did with the villains. But just to go on, we had a Harry and Peter, plot thread, rivalry. Then you had Peter dealing with Sandman coming back and finding out that Sandman was the one that killed his father.
Mm-hmm. Well, Uncle Ben.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry. My bad. My bad. I kept thinking. Because it's like a father figure. I kept thinking.
That's why I'm here, to catch you when you fall.
So basically, killing Uncle Ben and the guy that he basically, sort of kind of murdered in the first movie, even though he didn't push him, but he caused him to fall out the window by scaring him. That dude never did any. He was there, but so his Uncle Ben was. So they had that whole thing with Uncle Ben. Then you had the whole situation with Aunt May. Then you had his relationship problems with Mary Jane. Well, then you had his kind of thing that he was going on with Gwen Stacy.
Yeah, I don't think they should have introduced Gwen Stacy because she was just kind of there.
Right.
She didn't really
serve. She didn't do anything.
Yeah, she didn't really serve a purpose. It was just like.
Well, she was only there basically to get Eddie because remember Eddie and her were together.
Yeah.
And then when Eddie got when Peter went all emo and got Eddie basically fired from he got him fired from the Bugle. Right. Then they broke up, and she was going out dancing and macking on Peter, and Peter was having that whole to me. I felt like you could have saved a lot of issues with this movie. I think the biggest issue is the whole villain problem. I understand the whole.
They could have shaved off. They could have shaved off Venom, and
But the problem with Venom is then they could have. Then would you then still have the black suit? Would you have still introduced the symbiote suit and had him with the black suit?
I would say yes. I would say do it, but and Peter, and what I would have done is they would have used it throughout the film,
right?
But at the end of it, he gets rid of it, and then in the post-credit scene, Eddie Brock becomes Venom.
Right. My thing is that there was kind of a valid reason in this movie. To me, when you look at it, okay, he has the whole thing with Gwen Stacy, and they use basically Gwen Stacy so that they could build up the whole confrontation at the jazz club to where he then accidentally slaps Mary Jane and he snaps out of it. And then he goes to the clock tower or the church and then rips the symbiote suit. Yeah. So to me, when I look at it that way, then it almost justifies Gwen Stacy being there for a second, because then you
it does, but then you're using one of Peter's.
Yeah, you're basically relegating Peter's first love
and
as a plot device,
and I think one of the most important characters in. One of the
most important love interest in a Marvel character.
Well, that and that storyline, Death of Gwen Stacy, spoiler.
You say spoiler after you spoil it.
Well, the Death of Gwen Stacy is a pretty well-known comic, so I would say that's what kicked off the Silver Age of comics. If I know my history the way I think I do.
Well, it definitely kicked off a darker spin on, no pun intended, but it kicked off a darker spin on some of the Spidey comics. That was probably one of the first darkest stories they ever told. But there's certain things that when they happen, I'm like, okay, I didn't mind how they handled Harry. Basically, he's a villain at the beginning. Basically, they pick right up from this end of the second one where he is, still mad at Peter. He goes after Peter. But then Peter causes him to lose his memory from when he hits
amnesia,
have amnesia. Right. I kind of like that aspect because I was like, oh, cool, you get to have Harry, nice Harry, like Spider-Man 1 Harry when he was BFFs with Peter. But then then again, I understand because then with
when he was
sit down. I'm doing it so that way we're not talking while you're out of frame.
Yeah.
So you can edit this out. So so what I would say is that you have this certain characters being in there kind of makes sense. And feel free to jump in if you guys have something to add to that point. But like, I feel like when you look at it, I understand why they had certain characters in there so they could make a certain storyline fall into place. But at the same time, I feel like it would have been better served if you would have transitioned some of those plot elements over into a fourth film, which I understand though it's a trilogy, so they thought maybe they wouldn't have gotten a fourth film.
But that's where they made their mistake. They could have had 4 movies if they would have just managed
the third one better.
Yeah, if they would have just managed the third one better. If they didn't have Venom, they could have introduced him with.
Harry didn't even actually have to die. Now that I think about it, because he learns from Bernard that his butler that his father died by getting impaled on his own glider.
Yeah.
So he could have gone there and assisted Peter, and they could have taken down Sandman, and then he could have had this whole apology with Sandman, and then Harry and Peter made up, and then you could have had a Harry and Peter team up in the fourth film fighting Venom, and you could have killed off Harry at the end of the fourth film, and that could have been it.
Yeah, and that would have been, to me, that would have been a much better segue.
Now I'm like, why aren't we writing these movies?
Right.
Like, how hard is it to write us?
How Hollywood should have written.
Right, so there's that. And then you see, though, to kind of segue that, though, since we can't really use the Amazing Spider-Man franchise because it's not a trilogy, we can kind of use that to segue, though. Look at how the Amazing Spider-Man franchise worked out. You had the second film literally juggling like 20 different plot threads. You had 3 villains, one which was a throwaway character, which literally every one of his scenes was in the trailers, which was the Rhino. They literally gave away the closing shot and the shot of him in the armored truck at the beginning of the movie.
This is something we've gone over before.
They gave away. That's what I'm saying. They gave away the Rhino, and then they basically didn't learn from their mistakes from Spider-Man 3, and they abused the.
That's when Marvel was, hey,
give him back to us. Civil War, bro. Civil War.
Give him back to us, and we'll give you all the money you want.
Well, obviously he's still with Sony, but I mean, at least Sony's smart enough to know now that they bumped down Amy Pascal and done some rearranging after the leaked emails. What was it, in 2014 or 2015? I think it was 2015. Yeah. They kind of realized that they were making some errors with some of their
mistakes.
Did
someone say steak?
Right. So, where's the beef? Anyways, we should keep this in the video. That'd be perfect.
Yes, we're keeping that.
So, that's
totally
why
breaking the fourth wall. By the way,
they totally kept the same problems that persisted with Spider-Man 3, and then that's why you didn't get...
Let's repackage it.
That's why... No, listen, if Amazing Spider-Man 2 didn't suffer the same problems that Spider-Man 3 did, you had a better movie, you would have had... I mean, there was a lot of reasons why Spider-Man 2 failed.
Actually, I'm not going to go off on a tangent on Amazing Spider-Man 2. We can do that in a later video. Not doing that right now.
Well, we've already done that, remember? Because we talked about marketing missteps, and we talked about all the problems with Amazing Spider-Man 2, at least.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But... You guys made a good point. Like, you were just about to make a good point, though, that about the overcrowding when you were talking about that, though.
Yeah, because the thing is, they could have, again, if you wanted to kill off Gwen Stacy, do it in the second one. I'm totally okay with that. Take out Electro. Take out Rhino.
I would have kept Electro. Yeah. I would have kept Electro. Take out Rhino.
He's supposed to be the main villain.
And do the same exact thing they were doing. Do the death of Gwen Stacy. Bring in Shailene Woodley for the third one, and let everyone go crazy.
Yeah, like they could have. We talked about that though in the video. The problem with Amazing Spider-Man 2 was not just what they did with the film itself, but the fact that they marketed it to where they basically gave away every plot detail. Mm-hmm. They gave away every cool action shot in the movie.
They gave everything away.
They literally ruined the movie before the movie was even out. And so I don't remember how Spider-Man 3 was. I know they teased. They did tease every villain though.
But they didn't give everything away.
Right. No, because you didn't know. Like, we didn't know that Harry was going to bite it. You didn't know. Again, this is a movie from literally 10 years ago. So spoiler alert. But
if you haven't somehow seen this movie yet,
don't see it.
I mean, see it and decide for yourself. I mean, as a film buff, as people who all at this table appreciate film and what it brings, TV, film, everything is all relative, and that's what's great about like film is it's an art and TV too. Is like I can pick up. We could all sit here and we could all watch Spider-Man 3 and we could all take away stuff from it, because I can tell you right now, like I was just telling everybody earlier, the bits with Uncle Ben kind of resonated with me because I had a similar relationship with my grandfather. So the whole arc about him trying to redeem, like I felt that way because he got taken, you know, by, I mean, he wasn't murdered, but he was taken, you know, because of heart problems. And so with him going and instilling a lot of those same kind of qualities, like I kind of understood Peter's like motivation and rage and heartache. And then I also, so there were certain things in this movie I connected with, and I feel like you guys liked certain things from this movie too, but then we kind of all agree that there were certain things we didn't like from this movie.
Right.
But I mean to agree with your point, I mean there was certain things that we didn't like about this movie, and we've stated every single one of those reasons. I mean, the overcrowding, the 20 different plot threads that we had to try to figure out. But yeah, I mean that's.
It was just too much to follow.
I mean,
that limited amount of time.
Yeah, I mean it just really wasn't.
Wasn't it the shortest of the 3 movies?
I think so.
They tried to squeeze literally 2 love interests, 3 villains, and then an Aunt May subplot, and all these other things. Because actually, wasn't it in this movie? Was it the 3rd movie? No, it was the 2nd movie when he told Aunt May about. It was the 2nd movie because when he was having all the problems with his powers, and he told Aunt May about how it was his fault because he had let the guy go. But anyways, so.
I think that's.
Ian, anything you want to add? Because you've been pretty silent through this video. Is there anything you kind of wanted to touch upon that you think we didn't get to?
No, the main thing or reasons about Spider-Man 3 and the Amazing Spider-Man 2 was too many villains. I mean, too many antagonists in one movie. It's like I don't see any rational person or moviegoer can like process all this in, let's say, 120 minutes, 130 minutes. Like, no.
Right. Like, I would agree with that.
At least with Marvel, they know how to juggle that.
Yeah, which they made that. They kind of said though that Marvel's problem is with its villains, but at least my thing is that the story isn't about the villains.
Yeah, it's about
the heroes and their struggles and their rise. But my thing is that, which I kind of agree with, to piggyback off your thing, is that when you go to watch these films, though, you want to have a compelling reason to either like or dislike, or rationalize why these villains are there. Like, not to go off on a different tangent, but like with the new, like with the 2 Avengers films, you have basically one main villain, which was Loki in the first Avengers and Ultron in the second Avengers, and they had a mindless drone army that you can dispatch and dispatch.
But not so much in this next one. But we'll get to that later.
We'll talk about that later. But like they did that well to where you had a bunch of people that your heroes had to fight.
Right.
But it's not unrealistic. Like, it's not like, okay, fine, you're not dealing with 3 characters that you need to get character development from.
It's something that they've done in the comics 100 times. They take on an army of cannon fodder while one dude's running amok. So, I mean, it's something that they've done a million times in the comics. So.
Yeah, well, look at that though. Like, the problem was though is that with at least with some people, I actually really liked how they did Ultron, but some people complained that they didn't give enough development to Ultron. I wish they wouldn't have. Spoiler alert for Age of Ultron, because that's only 2 years old. Seriously, spoiler alert. For all intents and purposes, Ultron is dead in the MCU. We'll see. They could change that. But as far as we as the audience are concerned, they basically led us to believe that Ultron has been dispatched for now. So my thing is that, like, in terms of his character development, it's over as of right now. So unless they bring him back, that's all we got. So in conclusion, We just really want to thank you guys, though, for your continued support and for just following us and liking our videos and everything that you guys do. This is, again, a new segment we're bringing to you guys, The Curse of the Threequel. Our first entry is Spider-Man. We'll get back to you guys and post what we'll do our second issue in on this segment. We got plenty of great trilogies to pick from that, didn't have such a stellar third entry. We named actually some of them at the beginning of this episode, if you were paying attention, that we probably will, probably be one of our next videos, maybe not. But until next time, I'm Dominic Holloway.
I'm Ian Triggs.
And I'm Jacob Peterson.
See you guys later. That's all for today's episode. Thank you guys for watching.
And be sure to like this video and subscribe.
And click the link in the description below to follow us on social media.
See you guys next time.